fiery salamanders, blaze your fire into terror's dark night. In the name of freedom, freedom for all mankind, and for elemental light. Give a flame, give a flame, give a flame. Come, beams of fire, send for the energy to balance all apart. Come, beams of fire, give to mankind the deliverer of life. March, armies march, to the rhythm, to the music of the spheres. For etheric fire, reinstate the fire of purity within us here. Legions of fiery salamanders from the heart of God, from out the great central sun. Come, O salamanders, from the heart of Alpha and Omega, welcome, welcome, come. Beams of fire is for the balance, for the freedom of mankind, and elemental life bless. Multicolored fire of the seven rainbow rays, blaze God consciousness. Blaze, 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 blaze. Beloved of all the says, beloved Diana. Multicolored fire of the seven rainbow rays, blaze God consciousness. Legions of fiery salamanders from the heart of God, from out the great central sun. Come, O salamanders, from the heart of Alpha and Omega, welcome, welcome, come. Beams of fire is for the balance, for the freedom of mankind, and elemental life bless. Multicolored fire of the seven rainbow rays, blaze God consciousness. Hail, Ramesses, Prince of the fiery element. Hail, Diana, divine compliment. Fiery salamanders, blaze your fire into terror's dark night. In the name of freedom, freedom for all mankind, and for elemental life. In the archangel Michael we invoke thy blue-flamed sword. Come now, set the captives free. Cut them loose and set them free from all that's not Christ's victory. Welcome, welcome, come. O Saint Germain, we call thy freedom flame for all of mankind, and imprisoned elemental light. Blaze thy violet fire, oh blaze thy violet fire, blaze thy purifying light. Blaze, 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 blaze. Beloved Saint Germain, beloved Saint Germain. Blaze thy violet fire, oh blaze thy violet fire, blaze thy purifying light.
As we're ready to launch into the next part of our address, let us give the calls, the 6 mighty cosmic light calls that precede the song to Ramesses and Diana. The guy next door tells us that he's lecturing on UFOs, by the way. He says if you want to get beyond Elizabeth Clare Prophet, just listen to me. Okay, here we go. Number 12. I should give him my UFOSU forum. 6 mighty cosmic light calls. I am calling every person into action in me now. Unfading light of God, I am calling every person into action in me now. Unfading light of God, I am calling every person into action in me now. Unfading light of God, I am calling every person
religion into action in the soul religion now. Unveiling light of God, I am calling every religion into action in the soul religion now. Unveiling light of God, I am calling every religion into action on the earth now. Unveiling light of God, I am calling every religion into action on the earth now. Unveiling light of God, I am calling every religion into action on the earth now. The blazing light of God in the wilderness of His power is victorious now. The blazing light of God in the wilderness of His power is victorious now. The blazing light of God in the wilderness of His power is victorious now. Mighty archers, thou hated from God, descend with thy light, with thy love, and transmit all you settle in discord on the earth now. Mighty archers, thou hated from God, descend with thy light, with thy love, and transmit all you settle in discord on the earth now. Mighty archers, thou hated from God, descend with thy light, with thy love, and transmit all you settle in discord on the earth now. The light of God never fails, and the love of mighty I am given to the light. The light of God never fails, and the love of mighty I am given to the light. The light of God never fails, and the love of mighty I am given to the light. We speak to all who scuttle by energy or the middle power your days now. In God's name I am me, thou is often transmitted in the light of the nation of love forever. We speak to all who scuttle by energy or the middle power your days now. In God's name I am me, thou is often transmitted in the light of the nation of love forever. We speak to all who scuttle by energy or the middle power your days now. In God's name I am me, thou is often transmitted in the light of the nation of love forever. The unlimited of light now, and with lightning seen around the whole world, and all you shadows of the way before God's love. The unlimited of light now, and with lightning seen around the whole world, and all you shadows of the way before God's love. The unlimited of light now, and with lightning seen around the whole world, and all you shadows of the way before God's love.
Thank you. Won't you be seated? We come to a very interesting part of our lecture today on prophecy, which is the tying together of what I have said with current astrology. In some ways, discovering prophecy in astrology is like finding a needle in a haystack. What I have done is I have taken the prophecies given to me by God, and I have used them as clues to know what I am looking for in the astrology of the next 12 years. This I've been doing for any number of years, as you know. In the light then of prophecy, we look for corroboration from the signs of astrology. Astrology is the way in which persons, nations, institutions, planets receive the descent of karma and initiation. Every sign, every planet is an initiator and can play the role of guru in our life. We can have 3 people or 10 in this room, all born at the same time, the same place, the same year, the same minute. In other words, identical birth charts, and yet every one of us will be entirely different people. Why? Because it is not the astrology that creates us, but it is we who create our astrology. The astrology at birth is a sum of karma that the Lords of Karma has decreed that we will face in this life. When karma returns, we are tested. How will we meet it? Will we collapse and fold up, or will we decide to conquer, stand, face, and conquer? So everyone will meet his astrology in a different way, according to the psychology of personality developed through many embodiments, and according to his karma. So if we look at astrology again as a psychic prediction that is final, then we might as well sit back and believe in predestination, that we are victims of our fate. Not so with the sons and daughters of God. We see astrology and personal and planetary karma and initiation as an exciting challenge. We run to greet it. When we see the negatives, we call to the Elohim of God to encircle those aspects in our charts, those oppositions. We know what we read, and we decide to direct the light into the very cause and core of that point of vulnerability within ourselves. So what people think of as bad astrology indicates our own vulnerability. We will be vulnerable to what that astrology predicts on that day, date, and hour, unless we reinforce and enforce the light where we are and the violet flame to transmute the returning karma which that particular aspect foretells and brings. Now, all the planets in this solar system have a collective unconscious, a collective momentum of what their evolutions have brought forth. They also have a collective higher consciousness of what their evolutions have also brought forth. This is true of fixed stars and the most farthest influences upon our lives and our planet. So we can see that we reap good and we reap bad karma, which is multiplied by the energy field of the planets. This is something that scientists, of course, mock, and they tell us that it is ridiculous to suppose that planets that only appear to be in a certain relationship to ourselves and our point in time and space could possibly accurately predict what is happening. Well, if they had listened to astrologers' warnings at Cape Kennedy, they wouldn't have set off the Challenger and other failures, where we had a string of 8 failures in a row, at the times they'd set them off, because America was vulnerable to sabotage and to scientific failure at that time. Astrology is a science, but I think that I describe that science, as I have just done so to you, a little bit differently than the average astrologer. However, I'm not an astrologer, I'm a prophet, and so don't consider that I am an expert in astrology itself. I bring to you then what has been brought forth, what we have discovered, and first and foremost, it is the rare and powerful astrological configuration of 4 planets forming a conjunction in Capricorn. This occurred February 22nd and 23rd, 1988. This conjunction marks the formal starting point of a period of upheaval and change on the planet. Due to the intense influence of Capricorn and its ruling planet Saturn, it also indicates the start of an extended period of karmic reckoning. Now remember, we said that Capricorn is the point of origin of all cycles. And so that is right in line of what we've been talking about, of the delivery of the dark cycle. It starts in Capricorn, and so it is a cycle of light and darkness depending where you are in your evolution and how far you have come to dispel or transmute that darkness and replace it with light. This configuration will affect all of us differently and the planet as a whole. The Mahachohan is a being of light who is the representative on the planet of the Holy Spirit. He dictated on the date of February 22nd, 1988 in Beverly Hills. He said, "I am known as the Mahachohan, and therefore, beloved, understand that I represent to you not only the Holy Spirit, but the initiations of that Spirit. I have come then to deliver to this city the mandate of the Holy Spirit. Blessed ones, you have heard the interpretation of the 4 planets in Capricorn. One must understand that they represent the deliverance of the Holy Spirit's initiations to a planet. And as the result of the consequences of the violation of the Holy Ghost in little children, in nature, and the defilement of the body and the soul, so you will see that unless these things are turned around and a people invoke the light of their God and fulfill the law of love, those things projected will come to pass." This configuration is the testing of the 4 lower bodies of a planet and a people. Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are still in Capricorn to this date, although Mars has moved on. The 3 larger planets will continue to form a series of conjunctions over the next few years as they stay in Capricorn. Saturn, Uranus, Neptune conjunctions are extremely rare. The last one happened in the year 1307 in Scorpio, and it was the primary astrological impulse that resulted in the Black Death that eventually killed 1/3 of the population of Europe. Capricorn is an earth sign governed by the planet Saturn. It tends to limit or bring to an end unrealistic behavior. Capricorn is associated with hard times, difficult challenges, recessions and depressions, delays, lack of opportunity, and the limitation or loss of freedom due to increased governmental authority. Under its influence, people are often pessimistic, depressed, and victims of their own sense of limitation. What good does it do us to know this? Well, you feel a weight of depression coming upon you. And if you are with people who are Chelovs of the Ascended Masters and very sensitive, I can ask for a show of hands. at a decree session in Montana. How many have felt this weight of depression? Many people will raise their hands, and yet this is not a depressed people. They are joyous. So we look at what our prophecies are, we look at what our astrology is, and we know that that weight is a planetary depression. We look and we pray at the altar, we invoke the all-seeing eye of God. What is the origin of it? And we see a mass aura of darkness on the earth of depression that is foretold by this astrology, and that comes at a time which you can understand. The four horsemen are riding. They are about to deliver a physical karma. At the subconscious level, the souls of everyone on earth knows this. They know this. So there comes a depression. We're not ready for this event. How can we deal with it? And the depression of their own subconscious sets in. So we call forth the violet flame, directed into those conditions of consciousness. We call to the legions of light to bind that astral force of depression, and we see a clearing and we see a lifting. And we call to the 7 archangels and we sing to them, and we will do this as long as it takes to clear that depression, and we are working on a planetary scale. So we may decree and sing for 4 or 5 hours, and people may take breaks in between and come and go, but the room is filled for that period of time, and that is what a prayer vigil is all about. When you see the tackling of this substance, it is no small challenge. There was a conjunction of 5 planets in Capricorn on December 31st, 1929, marking the onset of the Great Depression. The Capricorn conjunction in February of 1988 marked the beginning of the period of economic contraction. The earliest sign of this Capricorn cycle was the great stock market crash of October 19th, 1987. What it is giving us is the sign that the era of financial expansion related to oil and international finance has come to a halt, and national economies have started and will continue to contract. There are a number of things we can expect from this conjunction of Capricorn. Nations will become conservative and reactionary. There will be a massive debt liquidation. The real price of commodities will fall. A pessimistic mood will sweep the earth. A crash in the real estate market is likely. The potential for war and revolution is extremely high. The United States government will be in danger of being destroyed or reformed beyond recognition, and we could expect major cataclysm. The next big drop in the market is likely to come around November 13th, 1989, when Saturn makes its exact conjunction to Neptune at 10 degrees Capricorn, and both make an exact opposition to Jupiter at 10 degrees Cancer. This will affect the United States stock market and more. It will be a critical factor in triggering major debt liquidation and could lead to the dissolution of much of the Western banking system. It could precipitate an economic crisis so severe as to lead to the dissolution of the United States government or provoke revolution. By itself, this Capricorn conjunction is momentous, yet several other astrological cycles that coincide with it drastically amplify its influence. I want to tell you as I say these things, these are the potential of an unrestrained release of the karma through these triggers in astrology. They are immediately mitigated when the light bearers call forth the light and sustain it. When we do our work, we can see the lessening of the effect of astrology. We have called our prayer vigils of our students worldwide, in cities of every nation, at a certain time and day and weekend. We will direct our attention to certain astrological forecasts, the prophecies in the heaven of returning karma. We will call to the legions of light. We will give many decrees that we have been taught to do. We will give the violet flame, and we will see the mitigation of that astrology and its effect on the nations. You have to realize that your God presence is able to affect the entire planet through you. You must not feel so puny and small, and that the effects of your mantras do not have an effect. They have a stupendous effect. You are a multiplier of God's light through your chakras. We are at the start of a new age. Astrologers have had a hard time trying to decide when the age of Aquarius began or will begin. Estimates range from 1762 through 3550. Although most estimates are fairly close to the year 2000. On January 1, 1989, at 5:57 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Archangel Michael gave us the key to the start of the age of Aquarius. He said, "We move into the new age today." Today, I say, is the first and most important step. Today is the step of resolution for the next 2,000 years. Blessed hearts, this is the springboard to eternity, and you will require every step to be the right step and the direct step. On the screen, I'm showing you the chart of the age of Aquarius according to that date. It doesn't have any planets in Aquarius, but it has a Capricorn sun and a Cancer rising and an Aries midheaven. However, it has 5 planets in Capricorn. Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, and the Sun are closely conjoined at 1, 5, 9, and 11 degrees, and Mercury is at 28 degrees Capricorn. The Sun is very close to an axis formed by 2 important fixed stars, Sirius at 13 degrees Cancer and Vega at 15 degrees Capricorn. What does this tell us? We find that Capricorn represents the father, or the yang, and Cancer the mother, or the yin. It shows that there is an axis in this chart that requires literally the righting of the axis of planet Earth, when all must come into alignment with this line of the father-mother principle, or the divine Tao. It shows that the initiation of the cycle by the 5 planets in Capricorn takes its thrust from Capricorn. The intense cluster of Capricorn planets anchors the Aquarian influences and the unbalanced karma from the age of Pisces and other previous cycles. In other words, we do not enter the age of Aquarius with a clean white page. So we bring with us the residue of karma to be balanced. It also resonates with and amplifies the essential characteristics of the Capricorn conjunction of February of 1988. If this is the birth chart of an age, we can compare it to the birth chart of a person that has a great mission and a great opportunity, but must first settle the accounts and come into alignment with that God star. The God star is the another name for Sirius. Aquarius is destined to be an age of economic, political, social, and spiritual freedom, as well as an age of technological innovation. This is due to the unique characteristics of the sign of Aquarius and its ruling planet Uranus, which convey the impulse for freedom, individuality, and innovation, while at the same time ruling group and community affairs. But it is not at all certain that the Golden Age will ever become physical. What we say and do here on Earth in our lifetime may determine the answer to the question of a Golden Age. Recently, I made this statement: I ask you to share with me on this day the sense of accountability and responsibility for which way the planetary evolution will go, and whether or not there will ever be a Golden Age of Aquarius. I would like you to know that question hangs in the balance today before the 4 and 20 elders. At this moment, so great has the darkness become upon Earth that it is not known if the next 2,000 years can be a Golden Age, or if anything thereafter can be a Golden Age. Nevertheless, that is the divine plan for the age of Aquarius. And whatever is the divine plan is the free will option of those of us in embodiment to outpicture. If it were not the divine plan, we wouldn't even have a hope of a chance or a breath of a prayer to bring it about. But here it is the divine plan. In other words, it exists as an etheric matrix, a pattern hanging just above our heads, waiting to be lowered. But where are the vessels? Where are the instruments? Where are those millions of souls who were supposed to be embodied in the last 20 years, who were aborted and whose entire life mission were aborted? This is another trick of the fallen ones that they have foisted upon us, and therefore the very life streams that were being sent to Earth to help bring in the age of Aquarius are not in embodiment, and this in the name of freedom, which is the mass deception that has been put upon men and women today. This cycle of danger is concurrent with a cycle of opportunity. During the dangerous period between 1988 and 1992, Pluto will be orbiting the Sun inside the orbit of Neptune, something that happens only once every 248 years. This cycle has coincided with epochal events, including the birth of Jesus, the baptism of Clovis into the Christian Church, and the discovery of the United States of America. The Uranus-Neptune conjunction, which happens only once in every 172 years, is also associated with new phases of history which have a scientific and mystical character and can lead to greater freedom, innovation, and enlightenment. When we have astrological signs and portents of great good descending, we have to realize that they are not automatic either. They are not predestined any more than negative karma is predestined. We have to work the works of God and make them become a reality physically in embodiment where we are. And that is the key. When we see a blessing from God coming, we know what is going to happen. The fallen ones are going to move in because they also read astrology, and they are going to try to nip the bud, dash the cup from our lips before we are able to drink that elixir. So we need to call for the protection of these descending cycles of good, these portents of great good, of the Christ manifestation en masse in the people of a planet. So we must look at both sides of astrology and recognize that free will and our presence in embodiment is the determining factor of which will triumph, the good or the evil. The dark cycle also amplifies the Capricorn conjunction. The chart for April 23rd, 1969, the beginning of the dark cycle, is characterized by not one but two fingers of God. The appearance of one finger of God is infrequent. The appearance of two is rare. A finger of God is formed when one or more planets makes a quincunx, a 150-degree angle to two others which are sextile, or 60 degrees apart from each other. The more prominent of the two fingers of God contains 6 planets, a close Sun-Saturn conjunction in Aries and Taurus, making quincunxes 150-degree angles to Neptune in Scorpio and to a rare Uranus-Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Virgo and Libra. This finger of God points to the karmic necessity for self-sacrificing spiritual activity in a practical mode in the spheres of government, the economy, social institutions, and agriculture. This chart does not have a concentration of Capricorn planets. But the dark cycle itself starts on the 12 o'clock line in the sign of Capricorn. Its cycle progressing around the cosmic clock from the Capricorn point of origin, which is the beginning of all cycles, as we chart them on the cosmic clock. On March 25th, 1989, Surya and Cuzco said, "You are given to understand that the dark cycles that are appearing are a conclusion of ages of the return of karma, and this karma is becoming physical. And therefore, as you go from the dark cycle of April 23rd, 1989 to April 23rd, 1990 and 1991, you will be seeing a greater physical manifestation of that which is now predominantly in the astral plane, although there be much in the physical octave that is the returning karma of thousands of years." There are other Capricorn conjunctions in the 1990s that will have a major effect on the world. We deal then with the Capricorn mega conjunction January 11th, 1994. 7 planets will be in Capricorn: Mars, Venus, Neptune, the Moon, the Sun, Uranus, and Mercury. It is a very tight mega conjunction. Under the influence of this conjunction, we could easily experience extreme economic and military challenges. We could see a dramatic loss of political liberty throughout the world, the establishment of dictatorships, widespread plague and famine, and danger from radioactivity, possibly from nuclear war. Let us look at the astrology of war. There are 3 major astrological cycles based on the relationship of the planets to each other, which correspond to positive periods of harmony, growth, optimism, and peace, and negative periods of destabilization, disruption, and decay. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, these indices will be in the depths of their negative cycle, indicating conflict of the magnitude of past world wars. In February 1988, as part of the larger Capricorn configuration, Saturn and Uranus formed a conjunction at 0 degrees Capricorn. Historically, Saturn-Uranus conjunctions have heralded war, even without the presence of other complicating factors we have discussed. The United States and the Soviet Union will both be affected by the Capricorn configuration. Many astrologers use July 4th, 1776 as the U.S. natal chart, giving the nation a Cancer sun. I have been taught by Saint Germain that the U.S. natal chart is April 30th, 1789, the day that George Washington was inaugurated and the federal government first assumed its formal powers. This is the U.S. natal chart. This gives the United States a Taurus sun. Pressure will increase between January 1988 and October 1991, when Pluto will be conjoined the Soviet Union sun and opposed to the United States sun. This is the first time this has happened since the Soviet Union was formed. This period is the time when war is most likely to break out between the superpowers. That is, if it's going to break out, that is when it is likely to happen. A lot can happen between now and then if we play our parts on this stage of life. Even if the United States and the USSR do not go to war, they will still have to deal with a mortal challenge to their nations: leadership and forms of government. On November 26, 1989, Mars will make a conjunction to Pluto and the Soviet sun. This is one of the peak dates for the start of war. On October 2nd, 1987 in New York City, Almorius said that if the United States did not develop the capability to turn back incoming nuclear warheads, there would be a confrontation before 24 months had passed. November 89 is just 24 months from October 1987. At the time I took that dictation, I was not familiar with this astrology. I did the research later. The Capricorn mega conjunction of January 1994 is fully capable of igniting war. At the close of the century, we will have another Saturn-Uranus square, which, as I pointed out earlier, coincides with major wars. In addition to the astrological configurations that we have been discussing, the sunspot cycle shows the possibility of war, economic chaos, climatic change, famine, and earth changes in the coming decade. Sunspots appear in a well-documented cycle which lasts 11.1 years on the average. It takes an average of 4.5 years for the cycle to rise from the least to the maximum number of spots, and an average of 6.5 years to fall to the minimum. The current sunspot cycle is one of the most powerful on record. Scientists expect it to peak sometime during the fall of 1989. The various forms of radiation created by sunspots and solar flares have a number of effects. The most easily measurable is the disruption of radio communications, but there are others. Scientist Marcia Adams and other investigators report a correlation between increased solar activity and freak weather conditions, crime waves, and political instability. Adams found that major wars tend to break out 2 to 3 years following the sunspot maximum, although they occasionally precede it. She also found that very large earthquakes, 8.0 and above, tend to occur 2 to 3 years after the sunspot peak. The last 6 sunspot cycle peaks have also coincided with major flu epidemics. Scientists and investors have also found links between solar activity and economic depressions and stock market drops. Climatologist Cliff Harris says that the current sunspot cycle will produce extremely erratic weather from now through the 1990s and will trigger the most extreme weather in 510 years between 1992 and 1996. He is predicting droughts in the Midwest that could drive up commodity prices. He is also predicting more intense and frequent seismic activity, 7.5 or higher on the Richter scale, as well as volcanic activity on every continent. The current cycle also coincides with a rare solar phenomenon, the retrogradation of the sun around the center of mass of the solar system. The sun has gone retrograde only twice in the past millennium, in the 1630s and the early 1800s. According to James Shirley, both periods were characterized by climatic extremes and by remarkable outbursts of explosive volcanic activity. He notes that both periods were marked by intense cold. 1816 was known as the year without summer. The cold winter during this period stopped Napoleon's advance into Russia. The cold weather also triggered widespread famines in Switzerland and the Ukraine. There were major volcanic eruptions in both time frames. As a result of the upcoming retrogradation of the sun around the Barry Center, Shirley says we can expect to encounter climatic extremes of drought, flood, and other severe and unusual weather, along with possibly major explosive volcanic eruptions. The most likely time for these, he says, is between 1993 and 1999. Now I would like to associate the 4 planets in Capricorn that have initiated this cycle of returning karma to the earth with the 4 horsemen. We will look at these on the quadrants. First of all, the white horse is represented by Uranus in the etheric plane, the first quadrant, the warfare of the spirit. In astrology, Uranus is the planet of sudden or unexpected change. Uranus conveys the impulse to individual and social freedom. It stimulates progress, especially in the areas of science, religion, and government. It is associated with originality, altruism, and group affairs, as well as anarchy, rebellion, and revolution. It rules the sign of Aquarius, the water bearer who dispenses the waters of knowledge. Uranus shows how a person establishes an intuitive link with the universal mind. It is related to the transmission of ideas from the etheric to the other 3 planes, the mental, astral, and physical. In its perverted expression, Uranus can block or distort the intuitive links required to bring etheric ideas into manifestation. As a result, Uranus can distort the religious, scientific, social, and political ideas which are intended to liberate the individual and society. The result can be bondage rather than freedom. Uranus then, from the evolutions who have lived there, has a causal body that is of light and perfection. These are all the good qualities that I just listed. It has the subconscious, or what we call the electronic belt. What we magnetize to ourselves will be what is within ourselves. So if we are vulnerable at the subconscious or untransmuted level of our karma, then we will attract the negatives of Uranus. We will be vulnerable to the 4th horseman, the first horseman of the 4, the white horse. So you can see what a delicate balance there is. And if you know it is Uranus that is behind the white horse, then you look at what the white horse does, and you decide that you are not going to take on the negatives of that karma, but you are going to take on the great causal body of light and pioneer ahead and call upon the positive good to be worked through you. The black horse represents or is represented by Saturn, and that's in the mental plane where we find the warfare of the mind. Saturn is referred to as the great malefic, but as I said to you before, all of the planets are initiators and gurus. Saturn is especially associated with the initiations of Lord Maitreya, as well as the work of Satan. That's why it is called the Greater Malefic. Saturn is associated with karma, restrictions, and long-term problems, and it is a disciplinarian. Saturn will never allow you to keep what you have not lawfully earned. It will strip from you everything that represents ill-gotten gains, shortcuts, misuses of the will of God. Saturn is the tester as well as the teacher. It rules time, responsibility, status, and the status quo. It governs political and social power, law and order, corporations and dictatorships. It regulates abundance and poverty. To them that have shall more be added, to them that have not shall be taken away that which they have. Saturn rules the sign of Capricorn and thus has some affinity to all Earth's signs, including Taurus, which is in the mental quadrant of the cosmic clock. Saturnian problems in the economy manifest as chronic lack or restriction due to past mismanagement of resources. Saturn's role as teacher associates it with all activities of the mind, including education. Saturnian problems related to education show blocks to education, such as the planned restriction of education by the power elite in order to ensure their own continued power and control over the people of this nation. Now, we who see and understand what a rotten education is being given to our children in the public schools must understand that to get to the root of it, there has to be transmutation of the causes and core of karma made under Saturn, karma made under the black horse in the mental quadrant. Not just pouring more money, but seeing to it that the Christ is raised up and that the teachers of our children are representatives of the world teachers. This is why in 1970 I founded Montessori International in Colorado Springs, because I had my own children and I determined that they would not become fodder for the mills of the public education system and not learn to read, not learn anything. And so that school has gone to the present. When we were in California, that school went through the 12th grade. Many, many children have gone through our school. It goes to the 6th grade now that we are in Montana. And we teach our children to read, not only by the Montessori method, but we use the techniques of Doman and of Spalding, the Spalding method for reading, where we show our children bits. They are called bits of information or cards, and they are already learning the sounds of the alphabet and its symbols from the time they are born. They are shown these cards and they respond with tremendous interest and delight when they are shown these and they hear the pronunciation. I learned these methods of teaching children to read when I had my first child, who is now 24 years old. And so I taught all of my children to read by these simple methods, and therefore to beat the game of the look-say method in the public schools, which requires children to memorize sounds without any logic or understanding of the phonics and the phonograms of our language. So if children are deprived of learning to read and write at an early age and they pass the sensitive period, they are burdened by this affliction for the rest of their lives. And so it happens in all of the other subjects, and so we find that the people of America do not have the education wherewith to meet the challenges of our times. So we can see what this goes back to, and we can see that it is not by simply having good ideas or putting programs into action that we solve problems. We must inject the sacred fire, the violet flame, the calls for divine intercession, because we are dealing, as Paul said, with principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in high places. We are dealing with unseen forces, subconscious forces, and the evil of the fallen angels who have manipulated the minds and intelligence of our people, even genetically, all the way back to Atlantis and prior civilizations. We come to the red horse, represented and representing the planet Mars, which also has a red cast in the heavens. This focuses on the astral plane, the emotional or desire body, and represents the warfare of the soul. Remember, the first horse in the etheric, warfare of the spirit. Mental plane, warfare of the mind. This is the warfare of the soul. Mars is the planet of action based on desire. It is associated with activity, courage, self-reliance, executive authority, passion, combativeness, anger, aggression, sexuality, and ambition. It rules wars, battles, crime, military and police forces, surgeons, engineers, terrorists, explosions, fires, and bloodshed. Mars rules the sign of Aries, which expresses both the pioneering spirit and rash, self-centered action. Mars traditionally also rules Scorpio, which governs, among other things, secrecy and warfare. Mars' traditional rulership of Scorpio gives it some affinity to all water signs as well as the water quadrant, where we place the red horseman and this planet. Mars is further associated with the water quadrant, the realm of desire, since it is the planet of action based on both conscious and unconscious desire. In its negative manifestation, Mars expresses itself as all forms of warfare. Under bad aspects of Mars in the chart, you can be sure that if you are not in God control of yourself and the situation, you can get into very explosive and heated arguments. And it is not of yourself. You're sorry about it afterwards. And if you happen to know anything about astrology, you can see that you were dealing with Martian energies on that day, and you didn't know it, you didn't heed it, you didn't pay attention, you didn't make the call to Archangel Michael for the protection of your being. Keep alert, watch out, and don't get into arguments with anybody when Mars is passing through your chart. So being awake and aware and alive and knowledgeable about these things, you can gain the mastery of your life, and even the mastery of your life in the midst of total planetary chaos. The pale horse Neptune is represented by the pale horse and represents it. It's in the physical plane, and this represents the warfare of the flesh. Neptune is the planet of mysticism, spirituality, and illumination. It is also the planet of chaos, confusion, delusion, treachery, and scandal. So you can see in every planet there's a high road of the higher octaves of light, virtues of light that you can internalize. There's the low road of the astral plane that you can outpicture. Some people in this world are creatures of their negative astrology. They outpicture it just like a textbook. And others stand independent and apart from it because they are subject to the divine astrology of their own causal body of light and their own points of reference of their victories and their initiations. And they are determined not to be moved by these influences. Neptune is associated with drug and alcohol abuse and is one indicator of sexual perversion. Neptune rules the ocean, liquids, swamps, drugs, medicines, gases, and poisons. In the social sphere, it rules democratic and popular movements, the common people, epidemics, social unrest, and socialism. When combined with Saturn, Neptune is associated with the aggressive expansion of world communism. That's that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It also governs the national taste for music and the arts. Neptune rules Pisces, the sign associated with liberation due to ultimate self-sacrifice and physical or psychological imprisonment due to self-delusion. There's always two roads that you can take. Always two roads. Neptune has an affinity to the signs of the physical quadrant, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius. Neptune's negative characteristics have an affinity to the negative characteristics of Libra and Scorpio, which are capable of producing treacherous and deceptive behavior. In addition, Neptune rules matters that are often shrouded from public sight, but which have extremely physical consequences, such as drug abuse and the transmission of venereal diseases. I have brought to you a number of times Mother Mary's prophecy for war at Fatima, Portugal in 1917, predicting World War I and another greater war. I have also brought to you the prophecies of Mother Mary currently given to the children in Medjugorje. I will not go over these for the very sake of time and for the sake of those of you who have heard them. But those who have not heard these, you are able to find these on previous lectures, tapes of those lectures that I have given. In addition, I have given to you the outline of Nostradamus' prophecy for war in this century following economic collapse, war in this century between the powers, the superpowers, the USSR and the US, and drawing Europe into that war. All of this is outlined in my book, Saint Germain on Prophecy. If you've not read Saint Germain's reinterpretations of Nostradamus' quatrains that I did publish in '86, I suggest you pick up Saint Germain on Prophecy on the way out and read that section of the book. It's not too long. The book looks formidable. It's a fat book, but the section on Nostradamus is easy reading, and it also gives you the background on Saint Germain. I'm going to skip that section then on that prophecy because it is well established both through Mother Mary and Nostradamus that the things that I have said could come to pass. The question as to why we are vulnerable to what the four horsemen bring can be answered in part by looking at our pollution of the environment and the great abuses that we have heaped on planet Earth. We can take these quickly. One is acid rain, caused by emissions of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. It causes pollution in lakes and streams, destroying aquatic life. It erodes buildings and monuments. 14,000 Canadian lakes have been acidified. More than half of the acid deposited in eastern Canada comes from the United States. And what a weak, half-hearted attempt did Ronald Reagan make to stop this acid rain. It is simply pitiful. Deforestation. Rainforests cover 6% of the Earth's surface. They directly influence regional climate and indirectly global weather patterns. Each minute, 100 acres fall to axes and bulldozers. That's 144,000 acres a day, 77,000 square miles a year. I know that you could join me in weeping over the desecration of Mother Nature upon this earth. Humanity and the powers that be, who value their short-term profits and power controls more than the continuing of evolution of life on this earth, have caused such a pain in the body of the Earth Mother, Virgo and Pelor, such profound pain to animal life, to vegetation, to vegetable life, and to mineral life itself. We feel the earth groaning in travail to give birth to a golden age, while the earth and all of these beings of nature are being crucified. This is why I wanted us to sing to Aramesis and Diana, and why we give the violet flame decrees for the cutting free of the elementals who are so bowed down by mankind's karma and then by the slaughter that is upon themselves. Ozone absorbs the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation in the atmosphere. It is destroyed by chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, contained in aerosol cans, car air conditioners, refrigerators, and styrofoam. Currently, a seasonal hole in the ozone layer over the South Pole has less than half the ozone it had 10 years ago. Worldwide ozone levels have declined between 3 and 7% over the past few decades. While the United States has taken steps to reduce CFCs, it must do more. Furthermore, only a worldwide effort will halt this irreversible process. The Alaska oil spill has been paraded before us night after night. We see it dumping 240,000 barrels of oil into the pristine waters, the slick covering 900 square miles. It will stain an area the size of California's coastline, and the wildlife death toll will include up to 10,000 sea otters, as well as whales, seals, walruses, salmon, herring, birds, ducks, terns, and cormorants. The outrage of this is you get a multinational corporation of Exxon, run by the godless and the power elite for whom money is more important. And you see and you know that in the right hands, that could have been licked in the first 12 hours and the first 24 hours. You see the president slow to move, and what happens is simply a cleanup, an attempt to make right a wrong that has gone too far wrong. The outrage of it is amazing. But you know, what is telling is one of the people interviewed during this oil spill, she said she couldn't get angry at anyone because there was no one to get angry at. And all she could do was feel a deep pain somewhere in the pit of her stomach. To me, this is a suppression of anger, a suppression of outrage, because the people of light on the planet do not recognize that this is the work of the fallen angels. It's part of their long-term project of population control. Population is getting out of hand on this planet. They can't control us anymore. Look at China today. They are unable to control the people, and therefore they regularly have to wipe out segments of the population through wars, through calculated and planned famines that play along with these astrological weather sunspot cycles. They take advantage of what is happening and they use it to that end of controlling the people. The people get too smart, they find out who their overlords are, they will overthrow them. So they have to destroy their minds with drugs, with impure foods, with medications that kill. They have to limit people in every way and make them passive with a mass influx of sugar and sugar products. And so the people have not the strength or the fire or the will or the desire to challenge such oppression. And it is a world oppression upon the human spirit. This is what we see today. And this Alaska oil spill is one of the crimes of the 2,000-year period. Saint Germain said on January 6, 1982, speaking through me when I was interviewed for cable TV, "Abortion is first-degree murder of God. Human government founded since Noah has been founded to protect human life. The nation or the government that creates legislation allowing murder is doomed to go down. It will go down by cataclysm, it will go down by economic collapse, but it will go down because it is not consistent with the laws of universal life. That is a fiat of Almighty God. I did not originate it, but it has the power of the Holy Spirit. It will come to pass. And if America does not refute legislated, legalized, tax-supported murder, the judgment will come as it came upon Israel and every other nation who has murdered its firstborn." I believe that the solution to unwanted pregnancies is to care for expectant mothers, to provide homes and situations for them where they can lawfully bring forth these children. The next solution is not to use abortion as a means of birth control, but to understand that the use of the sacred fire is a sacred responsibility, that we are co-creators with God, and we cannot deem sex as a mere means of pleasure. It is the means of the creation of body temples that are to house souls destined to evolve in this time. Most of us have a karma of bringing forth life because we have afflicted life in the past. We bring forth children because it is our responsibility, and because by having children we learn to love and we learn to care for life. By not having those children, many people who abort children as teenagers or early on do not have children again. And I am on the end of counseling such people who in sorrow and burden now do not have children, cannot have children, or life has passed them by. And they have actually skipped an essential element of the karma in their lives, when having born those children, they could have had even the fulfillment of giving that life, and then giving it up for adoption, or caring for that child even at personal sacrifice. The problem with our nation today and the West is that we do not consider that life necessitates sacrifice, but it does. And it is a sacrifice to bear children. It is a sacrifice, and it is a surrender unto God and unto our divine calling. And so Israel was judged, Judah was judged for the very practice of killing their firstborn children. Saint Germain said of that statement, "Out of the mouth of the messenger I spoke this day before a television camera, the pronouncement of God's judgment upon any nation that enacts a law authorizing murder through abortion. The nation that allows these laws to rest upon the books and therefore govern life itself is judged. And unless it be overturned, cataclysm has always been the judgment upon those who have defended death through their own selfishness and self-intent, rather than life in the sacrificial sense." Since 1973, there have been 21.9 million abortions in the United States of America. I submit to you that this is why we are vulnerable to the ride of the four horsemen in the next 12 years. Not only for the karma of taking life with the sword, those who take life with the surgical knife are bound to lose their life by the sword in some form. Not only this, but 21.9 million Americans are not in embodiment today. They are not able to fulfill their destiny. They are not able to join us side by side, to hold our hands, to have joy and happiness with us, to support us. Imagine the loss of such creativity, and many of these souls being light bearers, the forerunners of the age of Aquarius. The loss is incalculable. The loss is ultimate. It has destroyed the mandala, the blueprint of our divine plan, in which each one of us figures. Recently, I was at the altar at the Royal Teton Ranch, making invocations, and I saw the multitude of these souls who had been aborted, who had no bodies and yet had the tremendous desire to be amongst us. And they cried out to me to call for divine justice, that they had been denied their right to live upon earth in this time. And it was a combination of anger and frustration and tremendous desire to live, in the sense that they knew that they would be given that opportunity if there would be intercession by God and those of us in embodiment to make calls for them to have that opportunity to be born. If they are to have the opportunity to be born, as I see it today, it will have to come after this 12-year cycle, because it really is not the time to have a certainty of being able to bring up children and have children in health and in peace. We see the year 2002 coming, and it's an opportunity to start a new life and a new age. We have to make sure that we survive physically the turmoil that is decreed by our karma. And if and when we do, we desire then to see the bringing forth of these souls whose time has come to help us bring in the victory. And I made those calls, and I continue to make those calls for divine justice on behalf of these souls. Just think of it. They are fully conscious when they are being aborted. They experience the pain just as you would if someone mugged you in Central Park and knifed you. That is the experience, the saline solution, or whatever method is used. This is life, and this is how we have become insensitive to life, preferring rather to worship the god of lust than to bring forth these beautiful souls. We have been told by our host for the Whole Health Expo that we can continue because there is no one speaking after us in this room. However, I think that what I've prepared to deliver to you is longer than you may wish to sit for. So I'm going to be selective. You'll bear with me a moment here. I think what I would most like to tell you about is the lie of glasnost and perestroika, and how we can understand that this happened. This also is new information that corroborates what I have told you, that I have heard as God has taken me in my finer bodies to hear what is spoken inside the walls of the Kremlin. I have the assurance and the absolute inner knowledge and outer awareness of what is the plotting and the preparation for war on the part of the Soviet Union. And Saint Germain himself has told us that we have every reason to expect and to be prepared for a Soviet first strike against the United States of America. Astrology and the karma of the signs of the times point to the fact that the Soviets are ready for that war and could be ready for it any time. We ask the question, what could bring about the devastation and war on our own soil? As we examine conditions today, we see that our nation is indeed vulnerable to a Soviet first strike and to foreign invasion. America spends $300 billion a year on defense. So how did we get to the position of zero defense against nuclear weapons? It's not for a lack of money or technology. We have no defense against nuclear weapons today because of the logic of mutual assured destruction that prevails in our defense community. The United States nuclear strategy is deterrence. Let's not have a nuclear war. We live under mutual assured destruction, MAD, which says that neither side will start a nuclear war because after a first strike, both sides would retain the capacity to destroy large segments of the other's population. According to MAD, weapons that kill people are good. Weapons that kill weapons are bad. And defenses which stop nuclear warheads are destabilizing, that is, likely to cause war, since the side that has them can attack without fear of being annihilated in retaliation. So defenses are not inherently threatening, but they have become so in the context of our nuclear strategy. For MAD to work, both sides must abide by it, but they haven't. Based on MAD, in the mid-60s, the U.S. unilaterally froze its ICBM force at 1,054, dismantled its extensive and formidable air defense against enemy bombers, and virtually gave up on civil defense. The Soviet Union built an ICBM force which was powerful and accurate enough to destroy our military targets. They also began covertly building themselves a defense system and talking us out of building our own. The Soviets don't think like us. They believe it's possible to fight a nuclear war using relatively small weapons that destroy the enemy's weapons and win. They believe they can surgically remove most of our weapons in a first strike, leaving our cities intact. I promise you, and I guarantee you, that I have heard this very discussion going on inside the Kremlin. I hear their planning, I hear their plotting, I know that this is their intent. As God is my witness, as I stand before you as his messenger. We know the Soviets plan a first strike. We have corroboration from Jan Sena, former Major General in the Czechoslovakian Army. He's the highest ranking member of the communist military ever to defect. He was privy to the Soviet strategy for global conquest. He says they plan a first strike attack against the United States, most likely in a period of economic turmoil. If you want to hear him speak, get my videotapes and audio tapes of a Summit University forum I held at the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. And listen to what this man says, and you decide if you accept his credibility. The Soviets think they can survive a nuclear war for two reasons. In a surprise first strike, they can destroy over 2/3 of our warheads. They are rapidly completing a defense network to stop the rest of our missiles from hitting them. They already have civil defense for the majority of their population. After a Soviet attack on our weapons, not our cities, we would have about 2,400 warheads on submarines left. They are too small and inaccurate to destroy military targets in the Soviet Union. Following a first strike, the United States President would have the choice of either destroying innocent Soviet civilians and submitting to Soviet retaliation on U.S. cities, or surrender. Furthermore, Soviet defenses may soon be able to shoot down our missiles. The Pentagon estimates that the Soviets could have a countrywide strategic defense system protecting key targets in place by the early 1990s. This will consist of anti-ballistic missiles, ABMs, surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, and a radar network. The Soviets have their own Star Wars program, which is larger than ours. They have outspent us on strategic defense 15-1 since 1976. For them, Star Wars is a top priority. If the Soviets complete a Star Wars system, they will be able to attack us at will, since they will no longer be threatened by our nuclear forces. They will control space. They have built all of this by loans from Western banks. Billions of dollars are loaned to the Soviet Union annually by the West. That's our money. Since the Soviets are defending their country and people and we are not, we are vulnerable to a first strike. Over 17 months ago, I came to New York City and delivered the following prophecy from El Moria. Ere 24 months have passed, be it known to you that this nation must have the capacity to turn back any and all missiles, warheads incoming, whether by intent or by accident. Where there is no defense, you invite the bear into your own haven. Ere 24 months pass, beloved, there shall be a reckoning and a confrontation unless something is done. That was October 2nd, 1987. We are facing October 2nd, 1989, and El Moria has never countered that statement. He still says that after October 2nd, 1989, all is in flux on this planet, and we do not know what we can expect because we have no defenses in the United States against incoming ICBMs. Dictating through me in Portugal on February 26, 1988, Archangel Gabriel said, I tell you in this very hour, and I repeat it, the plans move forward with speed on the part of the Soviets for the installation of radar units and ABMs in multiple numbers. A vast assembly line prepared and moving forward, and this is also revealed by the intelligence of the United States Air Force. And yet there is still compromise. I tell you, beloved, the truth that I speak can save your life, and if you heed me not, you will one day hear my words again. Therefore listen unto me in this hour. The movement is accelerated on the part of the Soviets to move against Europe and to take the United States as well by a first strike attack. This is what is on the drawing board, and this is the only reason negotiations are continuing. I tell you, the step up is enormous, and in these days that are passing, in these very hours, your lives are being betrayed by fallen angels in power. Blessed ones, the acceleration is at hand, and El Moria has declared it, and it has not changed. Unless the United States change her course and defend the peace of the world, you will see an encounter as early as 24 months from October last. Blessed hearts, these are the facts, these are the realities. Wherefore we say, get thee to the high mountain of God, for this is the fulfillment of the prophecy of Fatima. On October 3rd, 1987, I told you what we could do to deter a Soviet first strike. It wouldn't take 6 to 8 years to put in a defense system. It would only have taken 24 months to put in systems which would defend our weapons, and these are what the Soviets target. These simple systems would deter them from launching a first strike because too many of our missiles would survive to threaten them. I talked about low-tech systems such as swarm jets and high-speed GAU-8 Gatling-type machine guns, non-nuclear interceptor missiles such as Iris and Hedeye, and a space-based kinetic kill vehicle, KKV system, a network of satellites. We could have deployed all of these. The technology is there, it's ready, and it's a non-nuclear defense. All it takes is a decision to deploy. Since then, even more promising systems have emerged, such as Brilliant Pebbles, which would consist of thousands of small missiles less than a meter in length and weighing about 5 pounds, which would orbit the Earth and spring into action upon detecting the launch of an ICBM. They would home in on the ICBM and knock a hole in it. Solely by kinetic energy, the missile would disintegrate, harming no one. The cost of this system, about $100,000 per pebble. And that includes launch into orbit. A system of 100,000 brilliant pebbles in orbit would cost about $10 billion, according to former SDI chief James Abramson. In addition to the brilliant pebbles, the United States would also need to deploy satellites to verify that an attack was underway. An additional command and control facilities, $4 billion. This brings the total to a maximum of $65 billion for the space-based portion of the defense. It would also be prudent to deploy ground-based defenses to take care of any warheads that manage to leak through the space-based pebbles. Although we are working on brilliant pebbles technology, no one is talking about deployment in the decade of the 1990s. In fact, the Bush administration is asking for $1 billion less for strategic defense than what Reagan had planned. But Bush isn't going to deploy anything because of Glasnost. Billions of dollars spent in defense outrages many of our citizens. Of course it outrages me too. I would like to ask, what price in dollars you place upon your personal life if you live to fulfill your destiny of realizing and becoming a Christed one upon earth. Think of the influence of one Son of God, one daughter of God, fully integrated in Christ. If you can live out your life to the full 70 and more on this planet, and you can become that Christ, not interrupted and downed by nuclear war, what can you do for this earth? What can happen to this planet? You and your mate, rejuvenated, resurrected after the year 2000, bringing forth these souls of light. We can bring in a golden age if we can survive a nuclear war. And that is why a nuclear war is so threatening and so planned by the fallen ones in our time, with the Western capitalists supplying the Eastern communists with all they need. It is because by waging this war, they will knock out our physical life and physical incarnation so that we cannot propagate and bring forth the Christ consciousness in Christed ones to whom we give birth. We have just discovered the path of health, the path of wholeness, the path of restoring our bodies. Now we are fit to be parents, to bring forth these light bearers. We are fit because we can call forth the violet flame and transmute those negative elements of our astrology and our psychology. Everything is set for our victory. Now, how much is one Christed one worth? Was it worth $1 billion, $2 billion, $10 billion to have Jesus Christ or Gautama Buddha or all the ancient prophets on earth? To me, it was worth that much money. They have changed the course of history. To me, you are worth that amount of money, you, the individual. That amount of money is being spent on drugs, on alcoholism. That amount of money is being raked in by organized crime and other criminals who control these capitalist corporations. That amount of money has been loaned to nations all over the world, and that amount of money has been loaned to the Soviet Union. That's where it is. Here's the story. This is the story of Glasnost. And this is the final section of my lecture that I'll deliver to you, and then we'll have St. Germain's dictation. The prophecies of Mother Mary and Nostradamus point to war in our time. The sunspot cycle, astrological cycles, and potential climatic variations point to a high likelihood of war. Economic and political conditions point to war. Yet in the United States and the Soviet Union, it's now chic to declare that the Cold War is over. In fact, in the United States, some people are claiming victory. Just this week, on May 17th, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr. published an editorial in the Wall Street Journal entitled, "Somebody Tell Bush We've Won the Cold War." Schlesinger argues that the new Soviet Union is not the old Soviet Union. He says Glasnost, to put it simply, means the end of Soviet totalitarianism. Glasnost, according to Schlesinger, and he ought to know better, he's a historian, will make the world safe for democracy. He goes so far as to say that anyone who thinks that an invasion of Western Europe is high on the list of Mr. Gorbachev's priorities should have his head examined. Schlesinger says that we stand at a great turning point in history, which indeed we do, but it's not the kind of turning point that he imagines. The Cold War may well be over, but the lamb had better not lie down with a bear. It looks like a hot war is about to begin. Schlesinger and those of a like mind in the governments, the media, and the intellectual communities of the West believe that glasnost is a new development in the Soviet Union. Contrary to popular belief, glasnost is not new, nor does it signal an era of irreversible change that will liberalize and democratize the most powerful and aggressive totalitarian state that the world has ever known. Glasnost is a time-tested strategy that has been used by Soviet leaders, including Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev, to purge their opponents and gain life-saving economic transfusions from the West. In short, glasnost is a sting operation. It is not just being designed to gain our money, it is also a fatal trap. It is a bear trap. Gorbachev is using glasnost in precisely the same manner as Lenin did. According to Edward J. Epstein, a highly respected authority on U.S. and Soviet intelligence, he says glasnost, a Russian concept that originally meant publicity or notoriety, has been an effective instrument of Soviet policy since the early days of the Bolshevik Revolution. It was first used by Lenin, who realized that power proceeded from denying others a veil of privacy for their decision-making. From denying others a veil of privacy for the decision-making. Hence, glasnost, or public airing, became a weapon for the Communist Party. Continuing from Epstein, by forcing local officials to engage in a process of criticism and self-criticism in which they had to confess to their own mistakes or point to those of others, Lenin made all government officials and lower-ranking party members increasingly vulnerable to party discipline and purges. In so doing, he strengthened the hold of the party hierarchy while at the same time increasing the appearance of free speech. As Lenin noted, glasnost is a sword which itself heals the wound it inflicts. Epstein says this miraculous sword could also be used as a powerful instrument of deception. To the extent that these controlled bouts of self-criticism were seen by foreign eyes as unrestricted freedom of criticism, it created the illusion of a budding democracy. As in all deceptions, a single indicator of a phenomenon, in this case criticism, is represented as the phenomenon itself, an open society. The logic went, democracies allow public criticism of officials. The Soviet Union allows public criticism of officials. Therefore, the Soviet Union is a democracy. Lenin began the first glasnost in the spring of 1921 when it was clear to him that communism as an economic system was not working and the Soviet state was literally bankrupt. He decreed the end of war communism, in which Soviet citizens had neither rights nor money, and declared the start of a new economic policy, or the NEP, that would be driven by market forces. Along with this economic restructuring, quote, the first perestroika, Lenin said that there would be political liberalization. Epstein notes, taken together, these measures suggested that the Soviet Union, despite its rhetoric about revolution, was slowly but irreversibly moving toward an accommodation with capitalism. The message implicit in NEP was the desired reversal of communism would be accelerated by trade with the West. Lenin gave Felix Dzerzhinsky, head of the OPGU, the security arm of the Communist Party and forerunner of the KGB, the responsibility of making sure the West got the message. Lenin made him head of the NEP's Supreme Economic Council so that he could control both the overt and covert channels of information to the West. Dzerzhinsky used his covert channels to show the West that the revolution was failing, and he used his overt channels to suggest that democracy was taking hold in Russia. By controlling both channels, he could control the West's perception of glasnost. He started what appeared to be opposition newspapers which proclaimed an era of change. He directed the OPGU agents to allow Soviet defectors to return and tour the underground, quote, They were allowed to attend dissident meetings and talk with recently released political prisoners so that they could report back to the West how censorship had come to an end under the new economic program. As Lenin saw it, the new atmosphere of glasnost opened a path to the American business community and created the proper climate to acquire U.S. goods, technology, and most of all, bank loans and credits. And as Epstein points out, glasnost also gave American lobbyists, public relation firms, and politically influential contacts a powerful incentive to support Soviet objectives. Sound familiar? Ever since Lenin told his comrades that the capitalists would sell them the rope which the communists would one day use to hang the capitalists, Western bankers and businessmen have eagerly complied. Lenin established trade concessions, that is, joint ventures, with Western businesses that were anxious to invest capital in Russia because she had a huge market and Lenin was offering what amounted to a guaranteed monopoly. But Lenin did not see this as peaceful trade or as something which would actually liberalize the Soviet state. Concessions, he told the Russian Communist Party in 1920, do not mean peace with capitalism, but war on a new plane. Lenin never mentioned this to the capitalists, of course. And the capitalists, being those fallen ones, were totally overpowered by their greed to milk the light from a new market of people. Lenin's strategy was to tell the capitalists what they wanted to hear, namely that the Soviet Union was a potential source of great profits and that trade made the Soviets more moderate. Armand Hammer, the first and foremost American advocate of U.S.-Soviet trade, told his fellow American businessmen that Lenin had admitted to him that communism does not work, much like Gorbachev now admits Soviet economic failures to the world via public pronouncements carried by mass media. The Soviet diplomatic corps was also used to convey the perception that due to glasnost, the Soviet Union was evolving into a modern state whose goal was now peaceful coexistence rather than world revolution. The OPGU, under Dzerzhinsky direction, used double agents, false defectors, and his opposition newspapers to reinforce the message. Using codes they knew had been broken by the British, the Soviet Foreign Ministry directed its foreign agents to stop subversive activities in the West. The deception worked. By 1925, more than 38 companies, including Ford Motor Company, had invested in Soviet enterprises. Before long, another 300 companies established concessions. Soon, a river of manufactured goods, trucks, ships, and planes, even completely built factories, was flowing into the Soviet Union and financed by Western credit. According to Epstein, the deception worked because it coincided with what Western governments wanted to believe, their vulnerability. It was convenient to assume the Soviet Revolution was a failure, if only because it ended the pressures to take military action against Moscow. And it was in the interest of Western governments to believe that trade with the Soviet Union would weaken rather than strengthen the revolutionary elements in the government. In essence, the Soviets manipulated the West by playing upon their inherent desire for peace. Peace at any price. And peace never comes at any price. Thus, Western governments and business leaders formulated policies that advanced Soviet interests at the expense of Western democracies. Moscow used this first glasnost to stave off financial collapse, thwart Western plans to isolate the Soviet Union, and to attract a dozen new communist parties to the Communist International, the Organization for International Revolution. In 1929, when the first glasnost had been used to accomplish its purposes, the NEP suddenly came to an end. All private investment was nationalized and all concessions were canceled. Glasnosts were subsequently carried out by Stalin, Khrushchev, and Brezhnev, each time to acquire goods, credits, and technology while simultaneously gaining strategic military and political advantages through arms control and greater acceptance in the world community. In our time, Mikhail Gorbachev has embarked on the sixth wave of glasnost. Some, no doubt, will argue that this glasnost is not the same as before. Things are different, and indeed they are. Now the Soviets have the largest nuclear arsenal and the most powerful conventional military forces in the world. This has changed the rules of glasnost. When talking glasnost, the Soviets also say the Cold War is over, but they approach the subject from a different angle than their counterparts in the West. The Soviets tell us that Gorbachev desires to change the emphasis of the Soviet economy so that it produces fewer guns and more butter, i.e. less weapons and more consumer goods. But they say glasnost is a precarious undertaking which may or may not succeed. Yes, the Cold War is over, at least for now, but they argue there are many reactionary forces in the Soviet Union who resist change, and the Soviet economy is a disaster. They say that if glasnost and perestroika are to change the Soviet economy from an inefficient, centrally controlled mess which emphasizes military production to an economy that is open, market-oriented, and designed to satisfy consumer wants, Gorbachev is going to need help. In other words, Gorbachev can succeed only, and here's the catch, if the West comes up with enough loans, credits, and trade to help the Soviet economy make the transition. Gorbachev's failure to achieve his goals under glasnost might mean the emergence of a more aggressive, militaristic Soviet Union under a hard-line leadership. In other words, Gorbachev is our only hope for the Soviet Union to turn to a more free enterprise type economy and join the West. Given the fact that the Soviets have great military power and nothing else going for them, this is a very effective threat. No matter how diplomatically it is couched, the message to the West is clear: pay up. In the neighborhoods of New York City, it's called paying protection. In other quarters, it's called blackmail. The West has paid up. Between 1985, when Gorbachev came to power, and 1987, the Soviet bloc borrowed $15 billion from Western banks. In 2 years, we have forked over our money, which represents the energy, the light, and the lifeblood of our labor. In about the same period of time, Western governments, at their taxpayers' expense, have loaned the Soviets another $12 billion. Western banks, Western governments. That's a total of $27 billion forked over to them in 2 years. In the last year, the pace of borrowing has dramatically increased. In October 1988 alone, the Soviets borrowed some $9 billion from Western banks. But paying up is not going to buy protection. The borrowed money is not going into the Soviet consumer economy. If the Soviets were using all that loan money to buy butter, why is butter rationed in 32 regions of the Russian Federation? And why are staple foods now rationed in 8 of the 15 Soviet republics? Night after night on television, you see the endless lines of Soviet citizens trying to buy anything. Even though billions of dollars have been poured into the Soviet economy, you do not see an influx of foodstuffs and manufactured goods, toasters, irons, television sets in Soviet stores. The situation in the Soviet Union is growing steadily worse. The Soviets are even importing potatoes, a Russian staple, from China. Personal savings in the Soviet Union are growing at an alarming rate, not due to prosperity, but because there is simply nothing to buy in the stores. So where did those billions of dollars go? They went to buy tanks, nuclear missiles, and other supplies for the Soviet military machine. In 1988, the Soviets increased the number of nuclear warheads in their arsenal by 15%. This includes 130 rail mobile SS-24s with 10 warheads apiece. In the same period of time, the United States produced virtually none. They also built 3,700 new tanks in 1988. If the Soviets were serious about developing greater political and economic freedom, they would have purchased butter, but instead they purchased guns. An analysis of the situation reveals that the Soviets intend to solve their economic problems by seizing the wealth of the Western European nations with their military forces. We see further evidence of this in the Soviet military preparations. If Gorbachev isn't planning to invade Europe, why do the Soviets have 27,000 meters of bridging equipment stockpiled on the east-west border? If his strategy is defensive, why are 3 million metric tons of ammunition stored in the Warsaw Pact's Western Theater? This isn't a very good place to store ammunition if your strategy is defense. Furthermore, why could American observers detect no defensive strategy in recent Soviet war games? If Gorbachev wants peace, why has he increased Soviet conventional forces 25% since coming to power? That's an amount equal to the combined German and French armies. Based on the evidence, we must conclude that a Soviet invasion of Europe is a very real possibility. When you read the Nostradamus section, you will see the exact prediction of the invasion of Europe by this individual from the East. The Chinese experiment with economic reform without political reform graphically illustrates what the Soviets have known for 70 years. You can't have just a little bit of freedom. Once people experience some freedom, they want more. Any true liberalization of Soviet society would mean that the nomenklatura, the Soviet elite, would lose their power and probably their lives. No Soviet leader is going to undertake such a program. That's why glasnost is and always has been an optical illusion. From the Soviet point of view, it makes more sense to drive their tanks to Western Europe and take what they want. We will not always be able to lend them everything they need. Remember, there is a catastrophic economic crisis ready to strike the Western industrial economies. When it is no longer possible for the Soviets to borrow what they need, then they will take what they want by force. Some will argue the Soviets will never invade Western Europe because that would start World War III. But that's not the way the Soviets see things. World War III is exactly what they are prepared for. They've invested in offensive and defensive nuclear and conventional forces, and they must get a return on their money in order to survive. I've discussed the economic reasons why the Soviets will be forced to go to war in great detail in chapters 6 and 7 of the book on Nostradamus in the paperback Saint Germain on Prophecy. Do not be taken in by the so-called signs of peace you see coming out of the Soviet Union. They are carefully choreographed to deceive you. Consider the notion that the Soviet Union is becoming more liberal, more democratic, hence more like us, that is, more peaceful. Gorbachev talks about reforming the system to provide greater freedom and dissent. On April 8th of this year, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, under his direction, did away with the oppressive penal statutes from the Brezhnev era that were used to give dissidents long jail sentences for exercising free speech or freedom of the press. But it replaced them with new rules that are worse. In the words of Soviet emigre Kathy Young, author of Growing Up in Moscow, the Soviet legal mechanism of political repression has been updated and fine-tuned to deal more effectively with new forms of opposition. Gorbachev talks about getting rid of chemical weapons, but used them on his own citizens who were demonstrating in Soviet Georgia. If he uses them on his own people, what do you think that he will do with us? Gorbachev comes up with peace overtures, like Baskin-Robbins comes up with the flavor of the month. But if you look at the Soviets' military internal papers, during the period of Gorbachev's rule, you find that the business end of the Soviet government is becoming increasingly hostile and aggressive towards the United States. They are preparing for war. And as it now stands, your government has chosen not to defend you. I wish to bring to you a few quotes from Saint Germain as we prepare for his dictation. He said on February 28th, 1988, "Therefore, beloved, know that that intent is on the drawing boards in Moscow and in the Kremlin, and has ever been. It is not new. And therefore I tell you, glasnost is a propaganda sham. I tell you the prince out of the Soviet Union is a sham and a liar and a betrayer of the people. And I say this directly to the heart of Mikhail Gorbachev. You may fool the people, but you have not fooled the ascended hosts of light. And you have not fooled the hearts of the light bearers in the earth. And you, Ronald Reagan, are a sham and a betrayer of my sponsorship, and you also shall know your karma for this betrayal of Europe and the European states. And everyone who has gone after these liars in the United States Senate and in the nation states of Europe Know that I, Saint Germain, do stand and my angels with me, and you shall not pass, and you shall know the judgment of your karma, and you shall know it all too late. Too late, therefore. And you shall have caused, therefore, the downfall of nations, and in so doing you shall have incurred a karma so vast as to be practically impossible to balance in eons of the future. Therefore I sound the warning, and I sound it with Archangel Gabriel, and I announce it to you, fallen ones. Though you may think you are the instruments of the karma of the people, let it be known that if you so become those instruments, the sword of Damocles shall be upon your own heads, and your victory shall be short-lived, and your triumphs and your celebrations shall be exposed as the very conflagration of hell surrounds you. Aren't you grateful that the people have a champion like Saint Germain?
Germain! Hail Saint Germain! Hail Saint Germain!
Hail Saint Germain! Thank you. Please be seated. We have not heard words like these coming from any representative in the entire United States government. And so you can see why our hearts so burn within us to acquaint the American people with this ascended master who is so very close to them, who is so very much a part of this American dream. Saint Germain said on February 13th, 88, "One does not rest one's case on a hope that enough souls of light on a planet will deliver the mandate of the violet flame that can be received by the karmic board to turn the tide of world history. There is more than violet flame involved, beloved. There is free will, and there are many in positions of power this day who have amassed power and wealth and armaments and technology whose free will is committed to world destruction. I should not trust my fate to their hands, nor should you. Therefore the wise will remove themselves to that point in time and space where they discover by meditation and unerring guidance of my angels is the correct place for them to be. Do not consider then that you, who have not attained to the levels of an ascended master, may turn the world around merely by the raising of the right hand. If it were so, beloved, we should have long ago done this through you. What you ultimately can do and must do in all of the promises you have heard is to invoke that violet flame and to continue to invoke it, and use Archangel Michael's rosary for Armageddon, for much will change, much will be set aside. Entire kingdoms may come to their judgment, yet you must be found out of the way. For this very process to occur, world chemicalization is in order. Blessed hearts, I trust that I make myself clear. The preparedness at a personal and national level has never been more paramount. Your preparedness in your life can be complete in a matter of months. When you are fully prepared and determined to survive physically in the earth, come what may in all of these predictions and those you have heard elsewhere, you are then a free agent of Saint Germain, and you may give your life and heart to this very cause of stopping those conditions in their tracks before they are outpictured. Therefore, rendering your preparations only a safety valve, a security net, a lifeboat, if you will. Saint Germain states that the very preparedness of the light bearers will deter nuclear war, because the fallen ones are out to destroy the shepherds of the people, the light bearers of the new age of Aquarius. Saint Germain said on November 29th, 1987, "When all the world has gone mad or asleep around you, beloved, you do not despair. You come into the awareness, truly the direct apprehension of your godhood. You kindle a sun in a dying world. That is your mission. You kindle a sun, and you adore Helios and Vesta, Alpha and Omega, the one true God manifested in all the beauty and glory of his light emanations. You become a sun. You are the sun, and you will let no darkness defeat it, put it out, or cast a shadow." Before I left my altar, that is very much near the heart of the inner retreat, right in the middle of the woods, I made the call to beloved El Moria to ask him if he had a message for me to deliver to you, to the people of New York, to the keepers of the flame on this occasion. El Moria dictated this message from the Darjeeling Council, and so I will read it to you. Whereas the Soviet Union has not halted its ongoing plan for a nuclear first strike, the light bearers of the world would do well to heed our earlier warnings and prepare. For the hour is fast approaching when nothing will be able to turn back that first strike. Signed, El Moria Khan and the members of the Darjeeling Council of the Great White Brotherhood. I would like us to now enter our period of preparation for Saint Germain.